turn itself out periodically. To help compensate for that, our plan is to try to make the video available on the website to the extent possible. And I'm also just going to present this as though you cannot see anything, in hopes that everybody's able to get hold of what we're talking about today. To give everybody a little bit of an orientation, the state of Texas has had basically two very large allocations of hurricane recovery funds. The first one being the original $1.3 billion. These are on the projects that are under construction, completing design, going through environmental review. A few of these have actually even gone through construction and have actually reached completion. For the round two is the $1.7 billion that we received earlier this year. And these are the funds that you've heard talked about in relation to a partial method of distribution and also a full method of distribution. It's a two-phase staggered allocation. Right now, we've been going through the phase one partial mod step of that, which addresses about 25% of those funds. On the non-housing side, these are the applications that you submit on October 1st. For phase two, we're looking at doing a method of distribution process with the four heavily impacted COGs sometime in the January to March 2011 timeframe. One thing that we want to emphasize is that the amendment that we're speaking about today is dealing with the disaster recovery enhancement funds that we recently received, which are separate and apart from those two previous allocations. So this amendment is not going to in any way affect those previous funds that were received or anything like that. That's a question that we have had pop up periodically during these discussions. As far as what we're dealing with today, it's approximately $67.9 million in these DREF funds. And we've received these funds due to the types of projects that the individual applicants and grantees and subrecipients on the housing side submitted during round one, as well as pledged amounts that took place during round two. Examples of the types of projects that helped us gain these funds from HUD were buyout and relocation of residents from high-risk areas, residential improvements to reduce risk. An example of that might be elevating a structure. Forward-thinking plans, which would be, for example, long-range plans and new development-related ordinances that help to reduce risk in future construction. And also infrastructure improvements that reduce residential disaster risk. These might be your improvements to drainage facilities that increase their capacity. One thing to keep in mind as we move forward with these is that part of these that are awarding these funds by HUD was all predicated on these projects being carried through to completion, as well as the pledges that we included in amendment number one. As far as how this works out, the round one DREF eligible submissions on the non-housing side was approximately $29 million in HGAC. Southeast Texas had approximately $8 million, Lower Rio Grande approximately $45 million, and DETCOG at approximately $2 million, for a total of $84 million on the non-housing side in projects that helped us get these funds. On the housing side, we had $11.1 million that were identified in the HGAC region for a full total on the housing side of $11.1 million. In total, the state of Texas was able to give approximately $95.3 million worth of round one and pledged round two projects approved by HUD. When that was plugged into HUD's formula to determine the appropriate funding amount for us, that resulted in the $67.9 million. In amendment number one, we tried to address the Disaster Recovery Enhancement Fund in hopes of getting as much money as possible to the state of Texas to help the local communities recover. In doing so, we established DREF set-asides or pledges for the three most heavily impacted councils of government, with an obligation of $52 million for HGAC, $16 million for Southeast Texas, and $10 million for the Lower Rio Grande Valley. You may notice that DeepEast Texas was not included in this list. That was a result of their round 2 non-housing allocation being much smaller compared to the other councils of government. And as a result, we felt that placing this pledge requirement was going to create some difficulties for them. As far as what we said in Amendment number 1 about how we would handle the Disaster Recovery Enhancement Fund, we stated that a minimum of 50% of these funds that we received would go back to the 4 COGs as allocations or set-asides, with the idea being that the efforts of the applicants in each of those COGs help the state of Texas get the money. As a result, we want to give that back and encourage the types of behaviors that we were seeing. In this particular proposal, we are actually placing 73% headed to the councils of government, which exceed our standard by 23%. Funds received as a result of DREF also maintain a proportional identity between housing and non-housing. And again, this proposal that we're putting forth reflects this approach. Also, the funds are allocated to the COGs on a pro rata basis, meaning that, based on what we saw in the round 1 projects submitted, as well as the round 2 pledges, that we were going to portion out the DREF funds in a similar proportional amount. The idea being, if the councils of governments were doing lots of these projects that qualified us for disaster recovery enhancement funds, they should get something in return for those efforts. As far as the housing and non-housing split, we plugged it into a formula using the round 1 and round 2 information. For round 1, we used the actual project amounts, and in round 2, we took that $78 million pledge and used the 55-45 split that we've heard discussed in previous amendments between housing and non-housing. That allowed us to develop a total funding forecast for the remainder of the program, which indicated that 69% of the projects that resulted in DREF funds were resulting from non-housing projects, while 31% were resulting from housing projects. The result of this was split of the $67.9 million as 46.7 going to non-housing and 21.2 million going towards housing. At this point, I'm going to turn this over to Adam Ensberg, who's going to talk about the housing program.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Ensberg. I work with the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, and I'm just going to talk for a short second about the housing portion of these funds. Of the $67.9 million, $21.2 million will be used for housing purposes. 75% of the housing funds received as a result of DREF are allocated based on the round 2 housing allocations, which is the same formula as the round 2 housing allocations. 25% will be held as part of staggered fund obligation process to allow compliance with DREF pledges in round 2. The COGs will distribute these DREF funds as part of the round 2 phase 2 mod process. And the funds are targeted to offset the cost of the homeowner opportunity program for relocation of persons out of the floodplain areas. TDHCA believes that this is what the subrecipients of these funds should do, and if the subs wanted to do something different, they would have to get our approval beforehand. On the next slide, you can see the round 2 housing allocation and the funds received through DREF by each COG, HGAC, Southeast Texas, Lower Rio, and DAC-COG. And on the right-hand side are how the DREF funds are split amongst housing. So.
For the non-housing portion, so we're looking at $46.7 million, and what TDRA is doing is go ahead and